Welcome to West Country Wanderings and welcome to another one of my series looking at our Gloucestershire Woodland throughout the seasons. I was last here for a late winter, early springtime visit just to see the early growth, the little buds on the trees coming out into life. Today we're going to have a look at spring. I'm going to tell you about what spring means in terms of transition. We're going to have a look at bluebells, of course the bluebells, I'll be talking about the bluebells, and also the trees, what it means for the trees, and also what trees mean for our physical health as well. So why not join me on another tour here on West Country Wanderings looking at a Gloucestershire woodland. With gentle hand, touch, for there is a spirit in the woodland. And so wrote William Wordsworth back in the 18th century in his poem Nutting. When does spring start? And we spoke about this last time when I did that in-between video looking at the end of winter and early part of spring. Now different people and different groups of people define spring depending on how they look at spring and what they're actually looking for. Now meteorologists actually define spring by being the 1st of March. Astronomers define spring as being around about the 20th of March when it coincides with a vernal equinox. Now for others, it was last month when the clocks changed right at the end of the month. The clock sprang forward 1 hour. That's how some people define spring once we've transitioned across that hour from GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, to BST, British Summer Time, of course. Yet others, like fishermen, define spring by the first of the brown trout. They're hatching. For me, it's a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more grey and imprecise. You have days, well, we mentioned before, which can appear to be spring. You have that day when the day feels warmer and calmer, and you have the next day when it goes wet and cloudy and we seem to spring back into winter again. But also it's when you have the snowdrops failing and you see the first of those daffodils. Now that can vary depending on what part of the country that you cover. For example, here in the West Country it can vary from Cornwall, where daffodils can come out early. I've seen them as early as late December, to here in Gloucestershire when they don't tend to come out towards February. But it's just not about the visuals, it's also about the sounds of spring as well. For me, it's also the sounds of things like hearing the first song thrush, or perhaps the flutter of a brimstone butterfly flittering across some woodland flowers. In terms of trees, one of the earliest trees to start leafing from the buds is the horse chestnut, closely followed by the sycamore, the rowan and the silver birch. In terms of the oak, the pendulicate comes first, by the sessile, which is usually towards the end of April going into early May. Now the study of when seasons change, when they transition from winter to spring, spring to summer, is actually called phenology. And in recent years, phenology is becoming of increasing importance, of course, to be one of the identifiers for climate change. But that doesn't just mean that spring is becoming earlier because the days are becoming warmer with global temperatures increasing. It can actually mean sometimes that spring gets later because autumn has been warmer, meaning that autumn goes on for longer, which then of course delays spring. Now, on previous episodes of this series looking at a Gloucestershire woodland throughout the series, I've touched on the importance of chemicals which come off the trees which balance our mental health. I've also mentioned about things like lichen can feed off dust. But trees play a phenomenal role in improving the quality of our air. Now in this part of the Gloucestershire, it's not an industrial area, it's not a large urban area. So it's not as important in terms of trees near cities, but it still has a vital role to play, as I'll explain. Now the air is much clearer under trees simply because the leaves on the tree act as a filtration system. Now if you have a car, you'll probably be familiar with the fact when you take it in to be serviced, they will change every so often the air filter because that gets clogged with particles from the outside and it means that the engine can't breathe. Well, in a similar way, the leaves on the tree are filtering air for ourselves by filtering out the impurities. And in doing that, it improves the air quality. The side effect of what I've just explained, of course, and the irony, of course, is that the combustion engine is one of the main reasons that our air has become so clogged with things like hydrocarbons, and that is why our trees are ever more important. Now, per year and square mile, the amount of particles and debris from the air that trees can filter out can come to an amazing 20,000 tonnes. Yes, you heard that right. So you have a square mile of forest, it can filter up to 20,000 tonnes, and you can check that fact because it comes from the State Forestry Department of Saxony in Germany, and I'll include a link for that below. Now, grasses and meadows can also filter out air in a very similar way to trees, but trees are far more adept and productive in doing so. And of course the reason for that is a purely one to do with the laws of physics, because trees have these leaves on them, and obviously grasses just have the spine of the grass and perhaps the seed and just the tiny leaves, but the trees, the surface area of the leaf of every single branch, the leaf that's on every single branch of every single tree, has a much greater, hundreds of times surface area compared to grasses in meadows. So what about the bluebells? Well, the bluebells emerge from the floor of the forest or woodland as a small white hairless bulb. In March, the sets of glossy arrow-shaped leaves with hooded tips begin to emerge. Towards the end of March and into early April, the stem starts to come between those leaves that have emerged from the forest floor, and then it slowly starts to unfurl to give that nice curved bluebell shape. Now, bluebells reproduce very, very slowly, which usually means they're a very good indicator of the age of a woodland. Typically, the more dense the bluebells in the woodland, the older the woodland will be. And obviously, they are predominant in our native woodlands, which are hundreds of years old. Here in this Gloucestershire woodland, that is best exemplified by the fact that here in this part of the woodland, this is the oldest part of the woodland. Now, when we've looked at previous episodes in the spring, we've gone further on down to where this woodland meets the railway track over on that side, and that part of the woodland is newer, and there are some bluebells over there, but they are much less dense than they are in this section here. And there are other parts where they've grown some newer oaks, some pendulica oaks, and there aren't any bluebells in that area at all. Now, the bluebells reproduce by dividing their bulbs, and they do this very, very slowly in a similar way to the wood anemones do, and that is another plant that is an indicator of how old a woodland is. Now, the United Kingdom has more bluebells in terms of density and range than any other country in Europe. And it's because of this, of course, that makes them so special to our hearts, particularly, of course, when they're so abundant and visible at this time of year in the spring. Now, the other thing to mention is the Spanish bluebell. Now, the Spanish bluebell was introduced into this country, I believe, towards the end of the 19th century and was planted in gardens, particularly formal gardens. But gradually they have spread into ordinary woodland areas, and unfortunately now they are perceived as a threat to our native bluebell species because they are becoming more increasingly common. Now, Spanish bluebells can be identified because they are stockier and they don't have that scent that our native bluebells do. There's also a hybrid version because they have cross-pollinated with our natives, and then because things will get more complicated in terms of identifying whether they're Spanish or native. But as far as I can tell, these here in this woodland in Gloucestershire are our native species. So where are the best places to look for bluebells in the West Country Wanderings regions? Well, some of the National Trust properties have some fabulous examples of native woodland. I'm thinking now particularly in terms of places like in Cornwall, you have Cateel in East Cornwall and Godolphin near Helston and West Cornwall. They're great places. Also Lanhydrock near Bobbin, where I went recently to do that swimming pool video. They're fantastic places. In Devon, you have the Team Valley. That's another wonderful place to look for bluebells. And in terms of Worcestershire, you have the Clent Hills in the northern part of the county. But I'm sure you'll find some bluebells close to wherever you live, whether that's here in the West Country part of the United Kingdom, in the United Kingdom generally, or indeed across the world. Well, I hope you enjoyed this springtime visit to a Gloucestershire woodland here on West Country Wanderings, enjoying the bluebells. I hope you managed to find some bluebells in your local area, wherever that may be, and take your time to enjoy it. and also get the benefits of the woodland in terms of the chemicals for our mental health and the quality of the air that the wood and our friends, the trees, provide, which benefits our physical health as well. Make sure to take your camera and do some mindful exercises and take in some wonderful photos of the bluebells as you do so, and capturing it so you can enjoy them in the months ahead when these unfortunately disappear over the forthcoming weeks. Until next time on West Country Wanderings, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you on West Country Wanderings again very, very soon. All the best for now. Cheers. Goodbye.